Ex-wife wanted child support for a kid that's not mine. Then I learned my own mom was behind her scam. Look, I know that sounds insane, but I swear on my life, every single word of this is true. This whole nightmare started a few years ago. I was married to a woman, let's call her Melissa, for about 3 years. Honestly, the marriage was a mistake from the jump. We got together young, and by the time we were a few years in, we were basically strangers who shared a zip code. We fought constantly, not in a passionate, dramatic way, but in a soul-crushing, draining way. It was clear we needed to end it, and we did, pretty amicably, or so I thought. The divorce went through. No kids, no huge assets to fight over. We basically just split our debt and went our separate ways. I moved on, got a new apartment, and started dating again. I was finally happy, like, truly, genuinely happy for the first time in a long time. I met a new woman, let's call her Sarah, and she was incredible. The complete opposite of Melissa. She was kind, supportive, and we had so much in common. We were talking about moving in together, maybe even getting engaged in the next year or two. Everything was perfect. Then I got a call out of the blue. It was Melissa. My stomach dropped. I hadn't talked to her in over a year. She was calling to tell me she was pregnant. I was confused and, frankly, a little annoyed. I asked her why she was telling me this, and she said something that made the blood run cold in my veins. She said, "Well, it's yours, and I need you to start paying child support." I just froze. I couldn't speak. It was so completely and utterly nonsensical that I actually thought it was a joke at first. We hadn't been together in over a year. I hadn't seen her, hadn't talked to her. Nothing. The dates didn't line up. Not even close. I told her that was impossible and hung up, thinking that was the end of it. How could she be so delusional? But she wasn't. The next day, I got a letter from her lawyer, a formal request for paternity testing and child support. She was actually doing it. I was so angry, so bewildered. I called my lawyer immediately. He was just as confused as I was, but he assured me that a paternity test would clear everything up in about 5 seconds. He said it was just a ploy to get money, a desperate move that would backfire spectacularly. So, I agreed to the test. I did everything by the book, provided my DNA sample, and waited. I was so confident that this was all going to be over quickly. I even told Sarah about it, and she was furious on my behalf, but she also trusted me completely. She knew the timeline, she knew it was impossible. But here's where it starts to get truly bizarre. The paternity test results came back, and they were inconclusive. Inconclusive. I stared at the paper in disbelief. My lawyer said that sometimes the tests can be flawed, so we did it again. Same result. Inconclusive. My lawyer was now getting worried. He said he'd never seen this happen with 2 separate tests. Melissa was using this to her advantage, telling the court that I was trying to evade my responsibilities, that the tests must be flawed because of something I did. It was a complete lie, but without a clear no, the court was starting to take her seriously. I was so stressed I was losing sleep. Sarah was trying to be supportive, but even she was starting to get uneasy. I started to suspect Melissa was somehow tampering with the tests, but how? I had no idea. My life was spiraling. The legal fees were piling up, and the stress was affecting my work. My boss called me in to ask what was going on because my performance was slipping. It was just one blow after another, all because of a kid that wasn't even mine. Every day felt like a new level of hell. The court was getting ready to schedule a hearing to determine temporary child support until we could get a conclusive test. My lawyer said we were in a bad position. This was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, all because of a blatant lie. A lie so ridiculous that I still couldn't believe it was happening. I was convinced someone was helping her, that she couldn't possibly be pulling this off alone. But who? This went on for weeks. The legal battles, the constant phone calls with my lawyer, the stress. I was a shell of a person. I started to resent Melissa, not just for the lie, but for what she was doing to my life. She was succeeding in destroying everything I had built since we separated. My relationship with Sarah was strained. She was trying to be there for me, but it's hard to be with someone who is constantly dealing with this kind of drama. One night, I was on the phone with my mom, just venting. She was the one person I thought I could trust, the one person who would be on my side no matter what. I told her everything, how I was being dragged through the mud, how Melissa was making my life a living hell. She was being a little too quiet on the phone, and I asked her what was wrong. She just said, "Oh, honey, it's just so complicated." I told her it wasn't complicated, it was a scam. She said, "Well, maybe there's more to it than you know." That comment, that single sentence, set off every single alarm bell in my head. What did she mean, more to it? Was she talking to Melissa? My mom had always been close with Melissa, even after our divorce. They were still friends on social media, but I never thought anything of it. But her reaction, it was just too strange. I pressed her. "Mom, what are you talking about? Do you know something I don't?" She stammered. No, of course not. I just feel bad for Melissa. She's going through a lot." That was it. That was the crack in the facade. I knew something was wrong, so I decided to do something I never thought I would do. I started digging. I got access to my mom's phone records. I know, it sounds awful, but I was desperate. I had to know what was going on. And what I found made my heart sink and my blood boil all at the same time. There were dozens of calls between my mom and Melissa, all at odd hours, all right around the time the legal stuff was starting. The calls were long too, not just quick check-ins. I even saw a text from my mom to Melissa that read, "Don't worry, honey, we'll get him to pay. We'll find a way." I was shaking. It couldn't be. My own mother, the woman who raised me, was in on this. I found more texts, more calls, and even a photo of my mom and Melissa together, smiling at a coffee shop. The betrayal was so complete, so profound, it knocked the wind out of me. It wasn't just my ex-wife, it was my family. It was a conspiracy. I didn't know how they were doing it, but I knew my mom was involved. I felt sick to my stomach. My entire world was collapsing. My mother, the person who was supposed to protect me, was actively working to ruin me. I went to my dad. I told him everything, showed him the phone records, the texts. He was speechless. He was angry, heartbroken, and completely blindsided. He couldn't believe his wife would do this. He said he'd confront her, and he did. It was a massive fight, the kind of fight that shakes the foundation of a family. I heard the shouting from my old bedroom, things being thrown, doors slamming. My mom eventually came clean. She admitted to everything. She said she felt bad for Melissa, that Melissa was struggling financially and that she was going to be a single mother and needed help. My mom said she thought I was a jerk for not helping her, and that since I was making good money, I should be helping out, even if the kid wasn't mine. She had convinced herself that because Melissa was pregnant and struggling, it was my moral duty to help her, and if I wouldn't do it willingly, she would find a way to make me. She had helped Melissa with the legal fees, had helped her find the lawyer, and had even given her advice on how to make the case sound more credible in court. The betrayal was staggering. My dad told her she was despicable, and he threatened to leave her if she didn't come clean to me and help me fix this. The entire situation was a waking nightmare. The revelation about my mom was a gut punch that hurt more than any of the legal trouble. It was one thing for my ex-wife to be a backstabbing opportunist. It was another for my own mother to be the mastermind behind it. The emotional fallout was immediate and catastrophic. I couldn't look at my mom the same way. The woman who was supposed to be my biggest supporter had conspired against me, all because she felt I should be financially responsible for a child that wasn't even biologically mine. My dad, bless his heart, was furious. He gave her an ultimatum. She had to go to my lawyer and confess everything, or he was leaving her. He had enough of her manipulation and deceit. He said he couldn't stand by and watch her destroy our family. So, the next day, she went with my dad to my lawyer's office. The look on my lawyer's face when my mom started talking was priceless. He went from a stressed, defeated man to a wide-eyed, shocked professional. She confessed everything. How she had been in contact with Melissa, how she had encouraged her to pursue the child support case, and how she had even provided her with money for legal fees. The real kicker, though, was when she confessed to what I had only suspected. She admitted to tampering with the DNA samples. She worked in a lab, and she had access to the kinds of chemicals that could render a DNA test inconclusive. She had actually done it. She had tampered with my samples to make it look like the tests were failing on my end. She thought this would put enough pressure on me to just give in and pay Melissa to make it all go away. The audacity, the sheer level of her betrayal, was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. My lawyer was now smiling, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a vindicated one. He told us that this changed everything. He now had the evidence he needed to not only get the case dismissed, but to potentially file a countersuit against both my ex-wife and my mother for conspiracy and malicious prosecution. It was a huge relief, but it didn't fix the personal damage. The family was shattered. My mom was ostracized. My dad barely spoke to her. The guilt was eating her alive, but honestly, I found it hard to care. The trust was gone. It was like she had died to me. My relationship with her was over. She tried to apologize, but her apologies were weak and full of excuses. She said she was only trying to help, but there's a difference between helping and actively trying to ruin your son's life. This was the latter. I told her that I could never forgive her, and I meant it. The woman I had known my entire life was a lie. This whole thing was a devastating personal tragedy. The legal part was just a side note. The legal side of things, however, moved incredibly fast after my mom's confession. My lawyer, now armed with the truth, wasted no time. He filed a motion to dismiss the case, attaching my mom's sworn statement and her confession to the court. He also filed for sanctions against Melissa and her lawyer, and a separate, very serious civil suit against both my ex-wife and my mother. The suit wasn't about the money, not really. It was about making a statement that you can't just conspire to ruin someone's life and get away with it. The court, once they saw the evidence, was appalled. The judge was furious. He called the actions of Melissa and my mom an egregious abuse of the legal system and a shocking act of familial betrayal. Melissa's lawyer immediately dropped her as a client. The case was dismissed, and a new hearing was scheduled to deal with the civil suit and the sanctions. Melissa, suddenly without a lawyer, tried to call me. She was begging, crying, saying she was sorry, that she was just desperate. I didn't say a word. I just hung up the phone. She had no idea the depths of what I knew, or that the jig was up. She just thought her lawyer had a change of heart. I was filled with a sense of grim satisfaction. It was finally over. The stress, the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety. It was gone. But the personal damage was still there, a gaping wound. My relationship with Sarah, which had been strained, was now back on track. She was amazing through it all, and she was the only person who truly understood what a complete nightmare this was. She was there to pick up the pieces, and I was so grateful for her. My mom, on the other hand, was a different story. My dad was still with her, but he was barely speaking to her. He was living under the same roof, but they were essentially strangers. He was doing it for the sake of the family's reputation, but he told me privately that he was ready to leave her if she ever pulled anything like this again. The whole situation was a mess, and it was all my mom's doing. She had betrayed not just me, but my father as well. Her need to help Melissa had caused an irreversible amount of damage. Melissa was now facing serious consequences. She was not only facing the civil suit from me, but also possible criminal charges for her role in the fraud. The kid she was having was still a part of this story, but now it was a sad footnote. That child was going to be born into a life of chaos, with a mother who was a con artist and a grandmother who was a co-conspirator. The whole thing was just tragic. The civil suit against Melissa and my mom was a formality. My lawyer had a mountain of evidence, and neither of them had the money or the legal resources to fight back. Melissa, now with a court-appointed lawyer, was a wreck. She was facing fines, restitution, and a black mark on her record that would follow her for years. My mom, on the other hand, had to face my dad's unwavering anger and my complete and utter coldness. The court ultimately ruled in my favor. They ordered Melissa and my mom to pay a significant amount in damages, covering all of my legal fees and then some. It was a win, but it felt hollow. The money wasn't the point. It was about the principle, about the fact that they thought they could get away with it. Melissa's life was now in shambles. She had no job, no money, and she was pregnant with a child whose father was nowhere in the picture. Her plan to get easy money had backfired spectacularly, and she had nobody to blame but herself. She was a cautionary tale. My mom, though, was the one who really hurt me. She had a nice life, a happy marriage, a good family, and she threw it all away out of some misguided sense of charity and entitlement. She still tried to reach out to me to apologize, but I just couldn't. I couldn't forget the look on her face when she confessed to my lawyer. It was not one of remorse, but one of fear of getting caught. She didn't feel bad about what she did. She felt bad about the consequences. That was the most painful part. The woman who I thought was my moral compass had no compass at all. I had to go to therapy to deal with the emotional fallout, the betrayal, the deceit, the fact that my own family would turn on me. It was a lot to process. My dad, my rock, was doing his best to keep the family together, but it was a fragile piece. He was a good man, and he deserved better than what my mom had put him through. He told me he was proud of me for standing my ground, and that was all the validation I needed. My new relationship with Sarah was stronger than ever. The crisis had tested us, and we had come out on the other side. She was my anchor, my port in the storm. We decided to move in together, and we were talking about a future. The whole experience, as terrible as it was, made me appreciate the people who were truly there for me. It was a lesson, a very painful one, about who you can and cannot trust. I had to rebuild my life, not just financially, but emotionally. I had to come to terms with the fact that my own mother was the villain of my story. The aftermath of the court case felt like the quiet after a violent storm. The legal battles were over, but the emotional cleanup had just begun. My relationship with my mom remained non-existent. She would call, send texts, and even have my dad try to broker some kind of peace. But I was firm. I told my dad that I loved him, but I couldn't forgive her. He respected it, though I know it tore him up inside. He was stuck in the middle, and I felt terrible for him. But I also knew that if he hadn't given her that ultimatum, I would have been paying child support for a kid that wasn't mine for years. She had made her bed and she had to lie in it. I learned that my ex-wife Melissa had given birth. She had a baby girl. I never saw a picture, never asked for a name. I wanted no part of it. I had no idea who the real father was, and I didn't care. That child was the product of a lie, and I was just glad I wasn't tied to it. Melissa's life continued to spiral. The civil judgment against her meant her wages were being garnished, and she was basically broke. She ended up having to move back in with her parents, which was a huge blow to her ego. She had tried to play the system, and she had lost spectacularly. It was a kind of karmic justice, I suppose, and while I didn't relish in her downfall, I also didn't feel sorry for her. She was a grown woman who made her own choices, and she had to live with the consequences. My life, on the other hand, was finally getting back on track. My relationship with Sarah was thriving. We had moved in together, and the apartment felt like a home, not just a place I slept. She was a constant source of support and love, and she helped me put the pieces of my life back together. We had a conversation one night, about a month after the court case was finalized. She asked me if I ever thought about what would have happened if I hadn't found out about my mom. I told her honestly that I probably would have just given up and paid the child support. The stress was unbearable, and I was so close to just caving. I told her that she was the reason I kept fighting, that I couldn't imagine losing her because of this stupid drama. She just hugged me and told me she was proud of me for not giving up. It was a good moment, a real moment, and it made me feel like I had won in the end. Not because of the money or the court case, but because I had found someone who was truly on my side. The whole ordeal taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you when things get tough, who has your back when the world is against you. My mom had failed that test in the most spectacular way possible, but my dad and Sarah had passed with flying colors. I was left with a smaller but stronger circle of trust. It was a hard lesson to learn, but a necessary one. I finally felt free. Free from the legal nonsense, free from the manipulation, and free from the toxic family ties that had almost destroyed me. The future, for the first time in a long time, looked bright. I was ready to close this chapter and move on with my life, with the people who actually deserved to be in it. Update. It's been about 6 months since the whole ordeal officially ended. I'm engaged to Sarah. I proposed on a quiet evening and she said yes. The whole thing was simple, intimate, and perfect. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of my life just a few months ago. It's like a different lifetime. My relationship with my dad has never been better. We talk almost every day and he's completely on my side. He's still living with my mom, but their relationship is a shell of what it once was. He told me that she's a completely different person now, withdrawn and depressed. He said she's trying to get me to talk to her again, but I just can't. The emotional scar is still too fresh. A few weeks ago, my dad told me that my mom was asking about me, asking if I was happy. I just told him, "Tell her I'm happier than I've ever been." I know it was a little cold, but honestly, it felt good to say it. She had tried to ruin my happiness and she had failed. I'm now a homeowner. Sarah and I bought a house a few towns over. It's a fresh start, a new chapter. We're getting a dog next month, and we're planning a small wedding for next year. The whole thing is everything I've ever wanted. As for Melissa, I've heard some things through the grapevine. She's been working a series of minimum wage jobs to pay off the judgment, and her baby daddy is apparently a total deadbeat who wants nothing to do with the kid. The last I heard, she was still living at home with her parents, and they were trying to help her get back on her feet. Her life is a mess, and it's sad, but it's not my problem. It's the consequences of her actions. My mom, I hear, is still trying to get back in my good graces, but I'm not ready. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive her, but I doubt it. The betrayal was just too deep. It's a sad ending to a chapter of my life, but I'm finally ready to start a new one. I'm so grateful for Sarah, my dad, and the few friends who were there for me through it all. It was a devastating experience, but it taught me who my real family is. And for that, I will always be grateful. This whole thing was a nightmare, but I'm finally free from it. Final update. It's been over a year since I wrote the last post. So much has changed. Sarah and I are married. We had a small, intimate wedding with just our closest friends and family. My dad walked me down the aisle. My mom wasn't invited and she didn't try to show up. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one. She sent a card and a small gift, but I didn't open it. I gave it to my dad to deal with. He said he would hold on to it for me. I think he's still holding out hope that we'll reconcile, but I've come to terms with the fact that we won't. I'm at peace with it. The legal issues are all long gone. Melissa is still paying off the judgment, but she's just a ghost from the past now. I don't think about her at all, and I've blocked her on everything. She's a cautionary tale, a lesson in not trusting someone you once loved. The kid she had is a year old now. I still don't know the name or the gender. I've completely severed any and all ties to that part of my life. My dad and my mom are still together, but their marriage is a shell. My dad has told me he's not happy, and he's not sure how much longer he can stay. It's heartbreaking to hear, but I know it's not my fault. She did this to herself. She chose to prioritize a desperate ex-wife over her own son and her own husband. She chose wrong. I've learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. You can't force someone to be a better person. I've also learned that forgiveness is a choice, and I'm choosing not to forgive her. Not for her, but for me. I've moved on, and I'm not going to let her back into my life to cause more pain. My life is good now. It's full of love and happiness and peace. I have a wife who loves me, a dad who adores me, and a home that feels safe. This whole ordeal was a fire that I had to walk through, but I came out stronger on the other side. And I'm not looking back. The past is the past, and I'm not going to let it define my future. The best revenge I've learned is living a happy life. And I'm doing that every single day. I'm finally free.